If I can have your attention, we are going to begin the lunch session of the Forum on Faith. So please, if you can, take your seats so that we can welcome the Governor of the State of New York to offer some introductory remarks. Thank you for your attention. We appreciate those of you who were able to be with us this morning. We were enlightened, we were inspired, we were edified by all of the messages that were shared. And it's my great privilege now to introduce the Governor of the State of New York, Governor Hochul.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wow, what an incredible gathering. I only wish this was Congress where everybody's sitting together from different perspectives and gave us more hope. But the hope originates in rooms like this. And I'm so proud of what we've accomplished here together. And I want to thank our elder, David Marriott, for envisioning this opportunity and for all the work that he's done. And I also wanted to express our heartfelt sympathies to all members of the Church of Latter-day Saints for the horrific attack that occurred in Michigan just a few weeks ago. We've extended that sense of shock, but also all of us feel particularly vulnerable. All of our religious institutions feel that in this day and age when there's so much hatred that's just boiling up, that attacks on our religious institutions are particularly egregious, but we all know that this is something we must stand together and support each other. I also want to recognize Reverend Dr. A.R. Bernard, the president of the Executive Interfaith Council that we've convened a few years ago to give me better line of sight and understanding of what the leaders of the faith-based community are hearing all over the state of New York. And we have 23 members of basically representing all faiths who understand that there's a incredible linkage between our policies and what we do in state government and what occurs in your place of worship, and how we all have the same objective, and that is to make all of God's children have a better life and to lift them up. And that is basically all we're talking about. I want to thank Reverend Bernard, Reverend Carl Washington, a member of my faith council. I want to thank you for all your leadership as well. I think we're expecting to see a representative of my faith, as raised as a Roman Catholic, His Eminence Cardinal Dolan. We also fortunate to have the Chief Judge that I was able to make as one of my early appointments, the Chief Judge of the New York State Court of Appeals, Chief Judge Rowan Wilson. And we also have a number of other individuals too. Dr. Carl Washington, who I know was honored this morning. Let's give her another round of applause. Office of Faith and Nonprofit Development Services. She's the one you want to go to for the money, so make sure you all have her on speed dial. And that was part of what this inception was all about. It's not just talking the talk and saying, oh, we have a faith council, we check the box, right? I'm very much a non-check-the-box person. I want results. I want meaningful conversations. I want takeaways. I want to know that we're making a real difference, because otherwise, why are we taking the time of so many people who have so much work to do in their own communities? So this was important to me, that we actually move progress forward instead of stagnating and saying that we've done all we can. So I'm really grateful for those opportunities. I also say, you know, as raised as a social justice Catholic, I'm not sure how else to describe it. My parents made sure that as a young child, they're big families, mentioned I'm Irish Catholic, big family, that we had engagement with other faiths. And they are part of this leadership couple in our community. I'm from Buffalo, where we'd get together and different religions observances and bring people to our homes from different faiths, and taught me the beauty of the diversity of the faith-based community and how it affected our own lives. And again, that common denominator of learning the teachings that I was taught and understand that that's a universal language in so many of your faiths. We're called to act while we're on this limited time on earth. We're called. And all of us are judged ultimately on how we deliver on those obligations we have as just citizens of the world. And I know that the people in this room take this seriously as you look out for the health and welfare and being of all those who look to you for leadership. You were all very much tested during the pandemic. I know so many times it was our our religious institutions step forward and were a place of comfort, especially those communities that were so hard hit in New York City here, where people just didn't know what was happening, and the loss of life was extraordinary, and the fear and anxiety. And yet, many of you stepped up and helped us bring life-saving vaccinations and did everything you could to save lives and to get us support for our healthcare workers that look to you for leadership. So I will never lose sight of the power when there's a crisis of all of you stepping up and performing the way you did so beautifully and so naturally. I would also submit we have another crisis right now. It can be known as a crisis of faith, but it's also a crisis of lack of faith in our institutions. And it's a lack of institutional faith that we have right now that I think is very damaging to our nation. And I want to make sure that as we're talking about solutions here over the next day, I know we're talking about societal problems and what we can do together, and I'm really proud of that. I'm looking forward to the takeaway. But also any of your insights on how we can have a national reckoning and a national healing, where the lessons that are being taught from your pulpits and in your institutions across the state are actually seeping into the people who come to you and somehow percolate up to our national leadership and those who represent us in elective office, to know that they have an obligation to not be divisive and not just to show how polarized and different we are, but to have a unifying force. And I believe that's the power of religion. It can be a unifying force for all those who believe. And I'm going to challenge you to figure out what that looks like, how we get to that place. It's not an easy task. If I knew the answer, I'd be doing it right now. But can we at least introduce that as part of the conversation? How at this moment in history of a nation that is still relatively young, 250 years of existence, this democratic experience is being tested right now. And all of us, I believe, have a moral responsibility to make sure that we endure these stress tests and that people feel confident that they're going to be okay and not have to worry about what's happening in Washington or in state capitals around, or in cities, what's happening right now. That they can just get back to, like, I'm okay. My kids are going to be okay. I can get a good education. I'm not going to lose my health care. I'm not going to lose my job because of tariffs or government shutdowns. So I know you're feeling this overwhelming sense of anxiety, and all of you dedicate your lives to just trying to calm down people who look to you at this moment in history. But I'm also looking to you at this moment in history as a leader of this state representing 20 million people. I take this very seriously and want to make sure that we're aligned together on what we can do, not just in policies. And again, we're going to continue fighting the scourge of opioid addiction and drug abuse. I lost a nephew to this horrible, horrible disease a few years ago. This is personal to us. But how we build more housing, give people the opportunity to believe in home ownership, or at least getting an apartment that they can be proud of and raise their children in, but also public safety. I was just with the Commissioner of Police this morning doing an event to talk about how right now we're losing millions and millions of dollars of money to support our subways. All of you understand how important the subway system is. It is the lifeblood of this region. If people stop feeling comfortable and safe because we don't have the money to protect it, then we are in a very, very dark place. So these are policies that I believe in, I care about, you believe in and care about. We also have to make sure that our voices are heard loud and clear of who we're fighting for when it comes to standing up to policies that we believe that are hurting our residents and our constituents and our parishioners. So that's our call to action, in my opinion. Regardless of what you believe, your political beliefs, you can check those at the door. That's fine, because the mission is larger than politics. It's larger than two different parties. It is larger than all of us. It is, what are we doing at this moment in time when our country is under stress, our residents are under stress, our families and communities are under stress, and what are we doing to ameliorate that and to bring God's word through the diversity of faiths in this room to people, to let them know, do not give up. Hope means everything, and the reinforcement of that message, in addition to not just the belief, but also tangible results and progress that we're looking out for others and not just ourselves, is critically, critically important. So I ask all of you to do that. I ask all of you to continue advising me on what that path should look like. And so a time of political violence and war, and we pray that there is a resolution to what has been happening in Gaza and in Israel over the last 2 years. We need the healing there. This is one of the most complicated places in the world, but we believe that there is an opening at this time when hostages are returned and peace is resumed and humanitarian aid continues to flow. I am optimistic about this, but that is just one part of our world. There are so many places around our world where people are losing the dignity of their lives and having health care withdrawn or support from the federal government, which I find egregious, that we're withdrawing money and vaccinations and support and food from other countries as a national policy. So let's also continue to speak out against policies like that, to stand up for what we believe in here in New York. Because I believe in New York. I really believe in this state. I believe that others look to us for leadership. And you, I'm looking to for the leadership to drive us to a better place based on our beliefs, our shared beliefs, that there is a God who's watching what we do, who's inspiring us, who gives us the words to live by, and I'll continue as your governor to do that as well. So congratulations to everyone who put this together. Great event. And Kara Washington, I want to thank you once again from the bottom of my heart for being a driver of change that is so necessary. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Now our invocation by Maytal Saltiel.
With deep gratitude to the Lenape people, the indigenous stewards of this land on which we gather, please join me in a moment of prayer or reflection. Compassionate God, called on by many names, we welcome your loving presence into this room, filled with connection and conversation across boundaries. At a moment when things feel so tender and difficult, remind us to pause and lean into our innate kindness, generosity, and humility. Divine Spirit, we thank you for the treasures of creation. Bless the bounty of your earth on the table before us. Bless those whose hands have helped prepare this food, from the farms to our tables. Bless all who have made this gathering possible, from those who have carefully planned our way here to those who will be cleaning up after we have gone home. May our bodies and souls be renewed in this nourishment and in our time building bridges together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shachianu, V'kiyamanu, V'higianu, Lazman Hazeh. Blessed are you, God, caretaker of the world, who granted us life, sustained us, and brought us to this moment. As your children of many voices and faiths, we say, Amen.
Please welcome His Eminence, Cardinal Dolan.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks especially to Dave Marriott and the leaders of the Church of Latter-day Saints, who have so graciously and effectively organized this timely and enlightening forum of faith. And renewed condolences to you, dear brothers and sisters, on the passing of President Nelson and the violent attack in Michigan. Just for the record, no judgment intended, isn't it a beautiful autumn day here in New York? We Catholics were in charge of the weather. The Latter-day Saints were in charge of a Yankee victory last night, so just saying, all right, just saying. Here's something very obvious, everybody. We here in the United States, especially here in New York City, are used to gatherings such as this. Folks of all religions or none at all, various languages, backgrounds, ethnic groups from every corner of the planet who come together in friendship and respect. We're tempted at a gathering like this to say, ho-hum, this is kind of ordinary, this happens all the time. Well, it might happen here, but it doesn't happen frequently in the rest of the world. I remember once when I was visited by a cardinal from the Vatican, Cardinal Cassidy, and he visited a Jewish synagogue. And he came back and he said, I am awestruck. He said, on the bulletin, but while I was waiting to go into the temple, on the bulletin board of the synagogue was a notice saying, the mosque 2 blocks away, the small mosque, had a fire, and they can't use their mosque for a while, so they will be coming here and using our synagogue until their mosque is repaired. Where else in the world can you say something like that? Never, ever can we take the ecumenical and interfaith friendship we savor here in this earthly home we cherish. Never, ever can we take it for granted. What we learn from an iconic event like this today, religion and faith, when they're used for violence and division, it's a blasphemy, all right? It's a contradiction. It is not religion and faith. As the late Pope Francis says, it is a work not of God but of Satan, all right? And an event like this reminds us of the nobility of religion. You and I assemble, do we not? Convinced that faith, religion, is the most potent cause of love and freedom, respect, friendship, peace, the fostering of the dignity of the human person and the sacredness of every life. Realistic we are, yes, that enemies might pervert faith and religion for their vile means, but never, ever do we allow them to dim or eclipse the light that true faith always brings, as it does today. Last Sunday, we Catholics heard as our Bible reading at Mass from the prophet Habakkuk, and it's worth listening to again. Something tells me most of us could lip sync it. Listen, Habakkuk is kind of moaning to God about the horrors that he sees in the world. How long, O Lord? I cry for help, but you do not listen. Why do you let me see all this ruin? Why must I look at misery? Destruction and violence are all around me. There's strife and clamorous discord. Then the Lord answered me and said, write down this vision clearly upon the tablets, so that one can read it readily. For the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, will not disappoint. If it delays, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not be late. The rash one has no integrity. The just one, because of his and her faith, shall live. Belief in that promise is precisely what brings us here this happy afternoon, right? Sure good to be here with you. Thank you. God bless.
Presenting the honors for achievement in building interfaith bridges, please welcome Elder Alan D. Haney.
In a world that's filled with conflict and disagreement and dissension, it's the religious community, with all of its inherent differences, that's best positioned to promote a functional dialogue and a practical approach to peace. This award is reflective of that opportunity. Bishop John Drew Sheard, born in Detroit, Michigan, is the 8th presiding bishop and chief apostle of the Church of God in Christ, also known as COGIC, one of the world's largest Pentecostal denominations. Bishop Sheard's also been the pastor of the Greater Emmanuel Institution Church of God in Christ in Detroit since 1988 and serves on the NAACP National Board of Directors. Bishop Sheard is known for fostering interdenominational and interfaith cooperation. My personal experience, interfaith experience with him, was a product of him inviting some leaders of my church to attend one of his Sunday services in Detroit. And he was gracious. He could have sat us down in the congregation with everybody, but he actually had us sit up front where he was seated. During that experience, I learned to stand and sway as I was singing, which is not something that I was accustomed to. I'm not very good at it, but I'm practicing now a little bit in a reverent way in my congregation. I also learned that when Bishop Sheard preaches, nobody falls asleep, and I've been putting people to sleep for years. In an act of tremendous interfaith trust and kindness, Bishop Sheard actually invited Elder Quentin Cook, who you've already met today, who was also in attendance, to preach to his congregation. I think those are moments that change relationships, and even more valuable than just having leaders of different faiths interact in that way. The best thing of all was it resulted in congregations of the Church of God in Christ and congregations of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to actually work hand in hand to bless people's lives, literally all over the country. Bishop Sheard understands that theological differences don't prevent people who believe in God and his love for all humanity from working together to accomplish much good. On behalf of the Forum of Faith, we proudly present the 2025 Building Interfaith Bridges Award to Bishop John Drew Sheard and invite him to offer some words of acceptance.
I invite you all to come to our services so that you may feel what Elder Haney felt. I am humbled and appreciative for the honor which you have bestowed upon me. I'm sure that none of us do what we do for recognition, but we do it because we believe it's the right thing to do. I thank God who has smiled on such an insignificant person as I and allowed to be viewed by this committee and those who have made this decision to deserve such an honor. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. However, due to the systemic attacks on democracy and civil rights in our country and abroad, we as people of faith must join together and pray for our people, the body of Christ, our nations, and those in authority. We must stand together and pray without ceasing that every single person has a chance at fulfilling their destiny. That destiny should not be determined by an individual, but it must be determined by God. My brothers and sisters, we are compelled to condemn in the strongest terms the attempts to deprive residents of their rightful constitutional privileges that the forefathers of this country clearly articulated in our Constitution. To deny that is to deny who we are. It is in the spirit of our founding fathers that we must respond to attempts to marginalize, dehumanize people, and to censor the interpretive historical frameworks that detail the God-given rights of everyone. Hate has no place among us. We cannot pray together if we do not love each other. In the words of a song written by David Frazier, it is his will that every need be supplied. You are important to me, and I need you to survive. We must be concerned about our fellow man. And the words of the prophet Micah are clear, that it is required that we do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. My brothers and sisters, let us be committed to spreading love and unity. God bless you, and thank you once again from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much.
Next, our keynote speaker, please welcome Honorable Rowan D. Wilson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have no business being a keynote speaker in between His Eminence Cardinal Timothy Dolan and United States Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, but here I am, thanks to my friend and former colleague, Elder David Marriott, one of the principal organizers of the Forum on Faith, who invited me to say a few words over lunch. What is faith, and why does it matter? According to St. Thomas Aquinas, faith is to believe what you do not see. The reward of faith is to see what you believe. The Pew Research Center recently reported that 76% of the world's population are people of faith. The religious traditions to which the world's faithful adhere are varied, as are the specifics of the rituals they practice and the doctrines they uphold. But there are also significant commonalities among the world's religions. Almost all center on a belief in an eternal creative deity. All place a strong emphasis on morals and ethics, on self-improvement and personal development, on the abandonment of materialistic, individualistic desires in order to attain a Buddha-like, Christ-like state of selflessness. All seek to offer their adherents the answers to the ultimate questions: why are we here? What are our lives about? And how should we live in this world? In addition, most religions encompass the idea of mystery. And by mystery, I don't mean a problem for Sherlock Holmes to solve. Rather, I understand mystery in the context of faith to be more like a secret, a truth that, but for divine revelation, would remain unknowable to us humans with our limited faculties. For instance, the concept of the divine's ineffability is central to Judaism. Jewish people believe that the divine's true nature is beyond human comprehension and cannot be expressed or even described in human language. This is why God's true name is never said, but reverently replaced with words such as Adonai, meaning Lord, or Hashem, meaning the name. Islam emphasizes al-Ghaib, an Arabic word that means the unseen or the hidden, which occurs 47 times in the Quran. Al-Ghaib includes the truths just beyond the horizon of human perception, knowable only through revelation from Allah, who is described in Surah Al-Jinn as the knower of the unseen. The Greek word for mystery, mysterion, appears 27 times in the Christian New Testament. Like Al-Ghaib, the Christian understanding of mystery encompasses truths hidden within God. The belief that God can and does reveal such mysteries to us is a central teaching of Christianity. Each week at Mass, Catholics proclaim the mystery of faith. Paul writes in his letter to the Ephesians that he prays that words may be given him so that he will fearlessly make known the mystery of the gospel. In all faith traditions, the beauty of mystery is that it requires us to open our hearts with wonder, humility, and trust. Mystery reminds us that we are not all-knowing or all-powerful, and in so reminding us, displaces our individual desires from the center of our universe and allows us to consider the needs of others. Mystery is the starting point of faith. Law, like religion, depends upon faith. And by law, I do not mean only what courts and lawyers do, but more broadly, governments and legal systems, whether monarchies, democracies, or anything in between, depend on popular faith for their legitimacy. Like the world's various religions, the world's various legal systems are grounded in conceptions of morality, of right and wrong, which in turn rests on popular faith that those foundational precepts matter and will be pursued. The public's faith in its institutions bears some relation to religious faith in that much of the workings of government, for better or worse, are mysterious, unseen and unknowable by the governed. Consider legislators for a moment. There are 535 members of the United States Congress. The New York State Legislature has 213 members, and there's an almost unknowable number of local elected officials, city or town council members, city clerks, school board officials in every municipality throughout the nation. Why and how they do what they do is, for the most part, a mystery to the governed. We expect each one of them, every one of them, to act in the public interest. And although different legislators may hold honest and diametrically opposed views about whether a particular action is in the public interest, the rule of law depends on faith. Faith that our public servants are acting beneficently to serve the public, not deliberately acting against the public interest. In the rare instances in which we discover that a public servant has breached the public trust, we have historically attributed that to the failing of the individual, not the system. We have not generally allowed our lack of faith in a person to erase our faith in the law. The mystery about why government does what it does is compounded by the unknowability of the body of extant law. As an example, no one knows how many federal laws, rules, and regulations exist, but the estimates are around 300,000. In 1982, the Department of Justice attempted to count just the number of federal criminal offenses. No count was ever arrived at, and the official in charge of the project said the answer was unattainable if you will have died and been resurrected 3 times. I suspect that no one here, even Justice Breyer, knows that it's a federal crime to sell onion rings made from diced onions unless you expressly say they are made from diced onions. For a system of laws, for a system of government to foster peace, justice, freedom, and equity, where so much is unknowable, faith in the system is essential, including faith that a first-time or small-scale onion ring offender will not be prosecuted. We cannot see that our votes are counted fairly, but we must believe they have been. We cannot see that juries follow the court's instructions or base their verdicts on the evidence, but we must believe they do. We cannot see that those making campaign promises or answering questions at a confirmation hearing mean what they say, or that persons taking an oath to uphold the Constitution mean to do so. These are all, for practical purposes, mysteries that require our faith if systems of law and government are to survive. What would happen if people stopped believing in God? Many think of religion as man's search for God, but in his canonical book, God in Search of Man, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel posits the opposite. The mysterious paradox of biblical faith, he writes, is that God is pursuing man. He notes in the book of Genesis, when Adam and Eve hide from God after eating the forbidden fruit, God looks for them, calling out, "Where are you?" He notes that Job at one point exclaims to God, "You hunt me like a lion." C.S. Lewis, regarding his conversion to Christianity, wrote that he remembered, "Night after night, feeling whenever my mind lifted, even for a second from my work, the steady, unrelenting approach of him who I so earnestly desired not to meet, I gave in and admitted that God was God and knelt and prayed, perhaps that night the most dejected and reluctant convert in all of England." If people stopped believing in God, the loss would wholly be ours. God would still be there undiminished, still loving, and calling us. But the rule of law is different, exists only as long as people believe in it. In that very limited context, supremely important while we are here on earth, faith in the law facilitates our faith in the divine. Our laws and governmental structures exist to preserve and protect our natural rights so that we may live in peace and have the chance to devote our lives to whatever we wish, be it country, community, craft, kin, or creed. When it comes to law, faith is essential even for those who lack religious faith. A little over a decade ago, the press reported an exchange in which Justice Scalia asked counsel for the town of Greece, New York, what is the equivalent of prayer for somebody who is not religious? Finding counsel unable to answer the question, Justice Breyer offered, "Perhaps he's asking me that question and I can answer it later." Whatever the answer to that question, the answer to the question, what is the equivalent of faith for somebody who's not religious, is much easier. Faith. Worrisomely, public faith in government has been falling over the past several decades. In May of 2024, just 22% of Americans said that they trust the federal government to do what is right just about always or most of the time. A survey conducted a week ago by the New York Times and Siena concluded that Americans have markedly less faith in the ability of the country's political system to solve problems they have than 5 years ago, with a majority saying our government could not meet the challenges before us. That declining faith is no doubt driven by many factors, including political polarization, media fragmentation enabled by the rise of social media, disassociation from local community events and involvement, and a crisis in civics education that has led directly to a steep decline in civic engagement. Some of the loss of faith in our institutions may be based on their own failure to embody the principles that underlie them. When people come to believe that there is a two-tiered system of justice, one for the rich and one for the poor, when people come to believe that the law is there to punish, not to rehabilitate, when people come to believe that the law is working against rather than for them, when people believe that most public servants are not serving the public but are serving themselves at the expense of the public, that is when people will stop having faith in the law and government, and things will fall apart. It is easy to find countless stories in today's news if you wish to believe that things have irretrievably fallen apart, but I return to St. Thomas Aquinas' words that the reward of faith is to see what you believe. Allow me to illustrate the point with two horrific stories that have dominated the news lately: the murder of Charlie Kirk and the murders of the worshipers of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Michigan. It would be simple to read the news stories about those events and conclude that the murderers had lost faith in God, in the law, in government, and in humankind. End of story. Reading story after story about bad news day after day, year after year, could lead to one's own loss of faith. But looking closely, you can see examples of faith shining through suffering and darkness, and seeing it can uplift you. Those two events have given us, in their aftermath, extraordinary examples of faith that allows us to see what we believe and which can strengthen our own faith in the law, in each other, and in the divine. At the memorial service for her husband, Erica Kirk forgave his murderer. She said, "I forgive him. The answer to hate is not hate. The answer we know from the gospel is love, and always love. Choose a life of faith." It is almost unimaginable how someone in such grief, having suffered such a terrible tragedy, could immediately turn to forgiveness. Such an act of grace required extraordinary faith, foremost in God, as she herself said, but also in humankind and the ability of the rule of law, not hate-driven vigilantism, to address her husband's murder. The former makes faith in the latter easier to come by. A survivor of last month's massacre at the Michigan church, who had her hands on her father as he died there, said she never took her eyes off the shooter's eyes. And in her words, something happened. I saw pain. He felt lost. I deeply felt it with every fiber of my being. I forgave him. I forgave him right there, not in words, but in my heart. A few days later, David Butler, himself a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, started a fundraiser for the family of the killer. Expecting to raise perhaps a few $1,000s, he raised more than $300,000 in less than a week, in donations averaging about $40. These two are extraordinary acts born of deep faith, including the acts of thousands of people who donated to help the widow and son of the attacker. If we see only the horror, faith is hard to come by. But if we look for the divine, we can see it. And when we see it, it becomes real, both for us and for those around us. God willing, none of us here will be placed in circumstances like that with our faith tested to such an extreme. But everyday life gives each of us the chance to practice our faith, whether in God, in the law, or in our fellow human beings, all of which are intertwined and symbiotic. The smallest of kindnesses, from holding a door open for someone to offering directions to someone who appears lost, repays itself manifold by re-emphasizing one's own faith and encouraging in others. A few weeks ago, I was on the subway, and a young man offered a seat to an older man, who thanked him politely but declined. Even the act of observing that interaction bolstered my own faith. Those of us who are public servants or whose acts are more visible to others have a greater opportunity and greater responsibility to restore the public's faith. Since I became the steward of New York's court system, I have made restoring the public's faith in the law our top priority. Our work aligns with many of the religious traditions represented in this room. Dorothy Day, born in Brooklyn in 1897, helped found the Catholic worker movement at the height of the Great Depression, a movement devoted to direct aid for the poor. In her words, her work was all about making the kind of society where it is easier for people to be good. The 340 problem-solving courts throughout New York State aim to do just that. These courts operate on the premise that a criminal case is an opportunity to those with treatable mental illness or substance abuse problems to put them on the road to obtaining the support that they need desperately, instead of incarcerating them at great public expense and with poor outcomes for them and for the public at large. Our mental health courts connect defendants to mental health treatment services they need. Our drug courts do the same for those struggling with substance abuse. These courts default to treatment instead of punishment. Their work helps fulfill Dorothy Day's vision of making it easier for New Yorkers to make productive choices in the complicated world in which we live. Thich Nhat Hanh taught the Buddhist precepts of understanding suffering and cultivating compassion allow each of us to look not only inward, but also to engage actively with the world's struggles. Hanh taught that societal injustice must be addressed through the legal system and legal systems that reflect humanity's interdependence and emphasize equity and healing. His work shaped the restorative justice movement, which advocates for shifting the focus from retribution to transformation. There's legislation pending in New York known as the Second Look Act and certain other criminal justice pieces of reform legislation that seek to effect that shift from retribution to transformation. The Second Look Act would allow an incarcerated person who has served a significant part of his or her sentence to demonstrate to a court that he has put in the work, has turned his life around, and he's ready to return home to family and community safely. This past February, in support of the legislation, I shared the podium for my annual State of the Judiciary address with 4 individuals, 2 formerly incarcerated and 2 who remain incarcerated with no end in sight, whose lives illustrate humanity's great capacity for redemption and transformation. The Jewish concept of tikkun olam, Hebrew for repairing the world, charges humanity with making the world a better place. I often hear tikkun olam explained as mending societal brokenness or repairing the fabric of the world. The Quran similarly teaches that the truly good are those who give away some of their wealth, however much they cherish it, to their relatives, to orphans, the needy, travelers, and beggars, and to liberate those in debt and bondage, those who keep pledges whenever they make them, who are steadfast in misfortune, adversity, and in times of danger. These are the ones who are true, and it is they who are aware of God. The Bhagavad Gita instructs that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be abandoned, but should be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. Many years ago, one of my daughters, then about 5 years old, went through a few months of repeatedly asking, "Why am I here?" She didn't mean physically why was she in the spot that she was standing. She was asking why she was here in this world. My repeated response to her was, "I know I am here to help you. You are here to help others." Perhaps the recognition that our purpose is to help others is the fundamental principle underlying faith, whether that comes from faith in the divine, faith in the law, or faith in our fellow human beings. All are interconnected. When one strand of faith frays, we must strengthen the others as a way to repair the frayed fabric. Those of you who have chosen to be here today know that, and know that our mission is to spread that faith to others in whatever way we can. From the tiny act of holding a door open to the monumental act of forgiving someone who has wronged us terribly. Let me close by extending my heartfelt thanks to the organizers of the Forum on Faith, as well as to all of you who chose to devote your time today to spend it contemplating how faith fortifies us. Let us, as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, walk on in the days ahead with an audacious faith in the future. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Justice Stephen Breyer and Professor Kate Stitt.
It's wonderful to be here. And before we begin our conversation about the Justice's understanding of the importance of religious protection in the history of our country and in its future, I want to turn to you and what do you think about this group? What do you think about this gathering?
It's great. It's great. I mean, I walked in and already put me in a better mood. I think, you know, there are two people who ought to be here, but they couldn't come.
Who are they?
Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Right. I mean, what did they want? What is that First Amendment I've got here? Okay. What is this thing that says Congress shall make no law establishing a religion or abridging the free exercise thereof? What did they put that in for? Oh, they'd see what could happen. I mean, we don't like certain things we may not like. Think of the religious wars of the 17th century. I mean, right outside Oxford. Latimer and Ridley held, the Catholics and the Protestants killing each other, and God only knows. I mean, it was terrible. And they said, we're not going to have that. And what we're going to have is the government stays out of religion, and people choose the religions they want. And when they have, at that time, really just three, Catholics, Protestants, Jews, and now about 80. If you go look up that, and there, believe me, there are a lot of sects. And they will get along, and they'll be protected in their religious beliefs. And so will people who are not religious. Think what you want in this country. And the government stays out. Now, that was a very novel idea at that time. Like, this document is filled with novel ideas. What not my wife, Joanna, who's here. My daughter's here, Chloe. She just got a very nice award. Thank you, good stuff. And great, it's great, it's great, it's great. And you see it, you say, what should we do? Have 50 of these meetings across the country. Bring people in. I was just at the Constitution Center, and they had school teachers from all over the country. And I said, what are you going to teach? They're going to teach this. And they're going to teach about the history of the United States. And they're going to teach about how you are all here together. Fabulous. Fabulous. And I think it's an experiment. That's what Joanna did. She said to our grandchildren, $20 to any one of you who memorizes Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Why? Think of those first two lines. 7 years ago, that goes back to the Declaration of Independence, word equality. 7 years ago, our fathers set forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. We are now engaged in a great war to see whether this nation and any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. You see, he says it's an experiment. It's an experiment. And I found a letter from Washington, he says the same thing, an experiment. All right? Why an experiment? Well, Kate and I both know. We were teachers. See, and I think when they read what the United States was doing in 1789, those French intellectuals who were like professors at Harvard and Yale, they thought they'll never succeed. But Washington thought we might. Jefferson, Lincoln. Fine. And now it's up to us. That's what I tell the 7th graders. That's what I tell the 7th graders and the high school students. And suddenly, you know what happened? Have you spoken to 7th graders, high school students? Sure, yeah, that isn't easy. Because they're looking out the window. Yeah, that's right. And I start down this line and tell them how I was taught to find someone who disagrees with you. Disagrees. And talk to, don't talk too much. Listen. And Senator Kennedy used to say that. You'll find they say something you actually agree with. And And when they do, you say, what a good idea you have. And then try to work with that, and maybe you'll get 30% of what you want. That's what you got to do. And that will work. And what's interesting to me, last word on this part, but look, when I start down this line with the 7th graders, or with the high school students, or whatever, the 7th graders aren't looking out the window anymore. They suddenly got interested because they see something they could do. And they some look in their eyes. It's that look in their eyes. Maybe I'm making it up, but I don't think so. It's that look in their eyes that suddenly they're interested. What can they do? And my goodness, I become an optimist. And I haven't had that feeling outside the schools except right now. I see people here from all these different religions. And there are probably a few who aren't very religious, don't tell anyone. But that's the point. That's the point. Across the country. Across the country. And yes, we can. That experiment will work.
That's great. You know, I think about permitting the Quakers to come to the New World centuries ago. That made a huge difference, not only for the Quakers, but for the future of our country, including for enslaved people, because that was the beginning of the abolitionist movement. Every time we let new people in, people with different beliefs, different mores, different customs, it works out that we make ourselves stronger and we make the country that much richer. But we're going to focus on, I think, a little more constitutional law, not as erudite as this morning. Justice Breyer was my teacher at Harvard Law School. I took 2 courses with him, and both of the courses, one was called administrative law, one was called antitrust law. They were both the same thing. You've got to be reasonable. You've got to look at consequences. You've got to understand that different folks have different values, and your job in interpreting a broad statute like the Sherman Act or the Equal Protection Clause is to take these competing values into account and fashion something that the whole nation can live with. That's also been your role on the court. I may come back to your role on the court. I miss you being on the court, teacher. If I had to, so I went back and reread his opinions about free exercise and establishment of religion, and they're of a piece with this whole jurisprudence. They're pragmatic, purpose-driven. They look at history and context and facts. But if I had to pick out one specific theme that comes out again and again in your religion clause cases, it's your concern for religious divisiveness. Concern that whatever the court does, it not lead to unfruitful social discord. And I want to give you an example of a couple of cases where you see this. You had many cases on your time in the court about the 10 Commandments, but there were, interestingly, 2 cases came out the same day in 2005. You were in the majority, you were the deciding vote in both cases. And people might think you came to contradictory outcomes. That's because you didn't follow a simplistic, rigid rule. You looked at the context of the facts of each case. You didn't say 10 Commandments, thumbs up or thumbs down. Do you remember those 2 cases and why you voted to uphold the placement of the 10 Commandments monument in the case out of Texas, but not in the case decided the same day out of Kentucky? And again, you were the deciding vote.
Yeah. Well, you took 2 of my courses? You did.
I did.
You were a glutton for punishment. But Archie Cox, whom I worked for briefly when he was in the Watergate, my brother worked for him for a longer time, he said read on these religious matters, a good essay, lecture given some time ago by Lord Radcliffe, who was an English judge at Northwestern. It's called The Law and Its Compass. And he points out this transition period, the Reformation, etc. And I think what I was trying to say in these 2 cases is the religion clauses are an area where it's very hard to decide a difficult case without looking back to the basic purpose of those two clauses. And we didn't want that 30 Years' War. And so keep the government out and let these different religions live together like law itself, trying to get people, 330 million of them now in this country, to live together in peace and productivity, prosperity, object that the law itself cannot achieve, but human beings through the law sometimes can get a little closer. Okay, we have one case where a judge who was really annoyed at the court's decisions on the free exercise clause and on the establishment clause particularly, he hammers up in his courtroom down in Kentucky a copy of the Ten Commandments. So he says, we can have religion in the courtroom. Well, I didn't think that was such a difficult case, because not to have an establishment of religion, if it means anything, you're not going to hammer up a religious symbol as great as the Ten Commandments, my God. No. The schools, the public schools, will not be involved in saying one religion is preferable to another, and the court had held, do not get the courts or the public schools involved in religion. So I thought that should come out, that what he did was forbidden. But let's look to the other case. The other case, again, the Ten Commandments, a monument to the Ten Commandments, a monument to the Ten Commandments in the garden, I think, or just outside and on the grounds of the governor's mansion in Texas. Now, there were some things about that monument. One, it was with about 50 other monuments that were all dedicated to good causes and different things, but it said to the people of Texas and their virtues or whatever. Okay, so this is one among several. Two, it had been there for 80 years and never caused any trouble. Nobody had ever gotten excited about it. Probably they didn't look at it. Three, it happened to be there because Cecil B. DeMille made a movie called The Ten Commandments and convinced a civic group to advertise his movie. I said, well, that, it just doesn't have much to do with religion as it's sitting there in that monument, and it's there for a different purpose. And I'm really thinking, in part, which I put in, look, people are getting all right with this. They're getting along all right. And we do not want groups going around in this country chiseling the Ten Commandments off of every monument that they can find. No. Okay? So I said they can do that. You see? In the one case, I thought to come out the other way and to forbid that monument in Texas would produce dissension, disagreement, religion versus non-religion. My goodness, it would cause a lot of trouble. And the other, I thought you have public officials in this country, in the courts going around putting up monuments for religious purposes. That too. What about the people who are not religious or the people in a different religion? And so I see in this document a lot of forethought of how when we go from a country of 4 million people in 3 religions to a country of 330 million people in 80 different sects and religions, we better be prepared. And we better be helpful to those people living together with more peace, more prosperity, and put in Lincoln and a few others, and you'll see that it isn't something that's guaranteed by the document. It isn't guaranteed without those 7th graders, 12th graders, and the groups, religious groups, and non-religious groups too, across the country, thinking about how we're going to be together and how we're going to teach the humane values that are underlying religions. They tell you, I think, I don't know, you're the experts, not me, but really, life is not just trying to make money. That's cheap, and we know that. Life is not just about trying to make get into positions of power. There are other things, and the older you get, the more you understand it. And try to write a memoir. First word in that memoir, which I've got to probably more than the first word now, but nonetheless, Turgenev has a great story called First Love. It's about a woman who falls in love with two people, and eventually she has a baby and she dies. The baby lives, but she dies, and Turgenev's last line in that short story is, and the saddest thing about this sad story is that she died before she had a chance to ask herself, what have I learned from this life? Indeed, what have I learned? And someone who thinks it's all about money or power or something like that maybe hasn't learned enough. And there we are. Okay? So.
I'm going to ask you about another pair of cases, Mr. Justice, but before, when I was clerking at the court, we called them Mr. Justice.
You don't have any
And then Sandra Day O'Connor is coming on the court. Yeah. What are we going to call her? Yeah. And Madam Justice seemed too awkward, so we just dropped the whole Mr. thing. So now it's just Justice. First, there are a couple of things. I believe that there's an image of the Ten Commandments and many other important images in invoking law at the Supreme Court. So in some sense, the Texas grounds, with their many monuments and put there for different reasons, and sometimes it's the artist's idea, not the architect's idea or the owner's idea, that echoes why it's okay at the Supreme Court, says your former student. But also, before I get to this other set of cases, I noticed that twice in one of your books and in, I believe, an opinion, you quoted de Tocqueville, who wrote that, quote, separation of church and state in this nation has been critical to peaceful dominion of religious exercise. So Mike McConnell talked this morning, separation of church and state, that's the way a lot of people read the Establishment Clause. He says it's only partly that. But that's very critical to the other part of the religion clause, religious exercise, peaceful dominion. And de Tocqueville goes on, and you quote, so that the, quote, spirit of religion and the spirit of freedom are united, and I love this, you use this a couple of times, reigning together in separate spheres on the same soil. So de Tocqueville wrote that a long time ago, and he thought that this, he thought that Jefferson and Madison and these guys were really smart, and this was working very well. Did it continue to work well? What has free exercise, religious pluralism, including people who were non-believers, all equal citizens, what has that contributed to the country? And then, of course, after you answer that, I'm going to ask you at the end, what about the future? But for now, what's happened between de Tocqueville and now, and how is religion and the free exercise, but non-establishment thereof, helped?
Well, what religion does, I'm sitting here almost alone with a room of experts. I mean, I'm not going to say something that they don't know. I mean, you do know. And you do try to bring people into an understanding so that they can answer, perhaps, Turgenev's question. Perhaps they can. I mean, you'll know. I won't necessarily, but we're still here. And we have 330 million people. And we've had our ups and downs, my God. And I worked for Senator Kennedy for a while, and he used to say that. He said, the country, back and forth. Extreme over here, then it goes the other, and Churchill is famous, you know that, his famous line that the United States always does the right thing after it's tried every other alternative. And yeah, okay. We have these 330 million, and we're here. Why are you here? Why, people do think of that question, particularly as they get older, and they see that it isn't just about me. It isn't just about each of us. And we try. That's what we used to learn in high school. And that's why I wanted to see those, I don't know, there were about 200 high school teachers, and say, teach them about this document. Teach them about how they aren't the only ones on earth. Teach them about how this document and these freedoms allow these 330 billion people, by thinking and maybe having some spiritual value close at hand, or at least there somewhere, and taking an interest in other people, and taking an interest in other communities and other points of view, how it actually can work. And it hasn't always worked. We've had some terrible times. This country's had slavery, it's had a civil war, it's had, Reconstruction, it's had all kinds of stuff. But, so far, knock on wood, we've survived. And so the more people can get that into their heads, of more of those young students, and a few years older, and tell them to get out there and participate, and tell them that they have, well, et cetera, et cetera. This is the kind of thing that you talk about every day. And so I just say, let's see that it's really done.
You've talked about teachers and students several times, and my last question is going to be about two cases involving state aid to schools, where once again, you were in the majority. I don't know if you were in the majority in both. I think you were in the majority in both, but you came out differently. And it goes back to this insight of the importance of anti-establishment, but free exercise. Before I get there, though, I just have to say, Mr. Justice, or Justice Breyer, you retired from the court in 2022. And you had been visiting Yale the year before for a couple of days, and there was talk about, are you going to retire? And I said, please don't. And you went, oh. And the reason is that you played such an important role. In many areas, from criminal procedure to religion clauses to equal protection, you had the effect of pulling the rest of the majority toward the middle. This was especially important in free exercise cases. There has been a recognition that we can have lots of protection of free exercise without wading into establishment. And I think you're one of the people who led the court to see that, as Professor McConnell mentioned this morning. When you retired, one observer noted that the court had 13 religious freedom rulings between 2006 and your retirement. And you joined the majority in favor of religion, the religious plaintiffs, 9 of those 13 times. I would say that the theme in all of these cases was respecting religious liberty while minimizing public discord. And that doesn't mean the religious plaintiffs often win, or always win, sorry. So let me end with these two cases about schools. One involved a voucher program that was going to go to all parents whose children went to private schools. They could go to public school for free, or they could get a voucher that would partially pay tuition at a private school. All private schools except for religious schools. The other case, and you wrote in that case, the parents, there is no requirement that the states fund the public schools, particularly because they would be funding the teaching of religion.
Depends on how you're teaching it. Those are tough cases. The Establishment Clause cases are very tough cases. We have a case, the schools, the legislature wants to give money for redoing the playgrounds.
But that was my other case out of Missouri, the playground case.
Yeah, well, that's establishment, please. I mean, that's a tarmac on the playground. I mean, but paying the teacher, paying the priests or the religious leaders' salary, that's quite a different thing. And you have to be prepared if you're going to be a judge, I don't know, but you have to be prepared to sort of get into something in detail, in depth, and not be to sort of, you have to think about it and think about the details of it and think about how it stacks up against the values that are there in the document. So I'm not saying everybody'd have to agree with me, they might not, but look, tarmac on a playground? Please. You'd have to be an extremist to stop the state from paying
Although it
for
didn't
that.
stop the lower courts from saying,
Well, I know that's the big difference. I think that we're fighting out in the law now. That's a big difference. There are people like Nino Scalia, and we got on very well. We used to debate, and he'd say, in schools particularly, we'd go to the colleges, and I would say, Nino, we have the First Amendment here, and George Washington didn't know about the internet, and because he likes rules. And he said, Nino, when I said that, would say, I knew that. And then he would say, really the difference between us is that it's the two campers. So I said, what are the two campers? He said, one sees the other putting on running shoes. And he says, what are you doing? He says, there's a bear in the camp. A bear in the camp? He says, well, my God, you can't outrun a bear. He says, yeah, but I can outrun you. And so he'd think I was too complicated and that I was asking people to do things that judges have a hard time doing, figuring out basic values and figuring out purposes and figuring out consequences. And text, of course, is important. And he thought he had a simpler system, have a lot of rules. And probably, if you really go into it, you began to think, well, he likes rules. They help him live. And I think life is a mess. All right, there we are. And so I'm wary of too many rules. Not never. Of course you have rules, but beware.
so you're a standards man, not a rules man.
Montaigne said that. He said that in 1584. He said, I don't think we should have all these laws. He says, Justinian, who was the emperor of Rome, thought he could control his judges by having dozens of statutes. Doesn't that stupid man know that for every new statute you have and for every new word, all you get are an argument among lawyers about its meaning? Things get worse, not better. In any case, Montaigne said, don't have so many rules. Have standards, approaches, more general things that you can make exceptions if necessary, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, I'd rather live in a country with no rules, no laws, than a country like France with too many.
Well, I want to say that we're very happy to have lived in a country where you contributed as a professor. You continue to be a professor now. You write books, but your decisions, opinions on the Supreme Court, and the particular persuasiveness that you had over your years there have contributed mightily to what we are all here for. We thank you, Mr. Chief.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Keep going. Thank you.
Presenting the Medal of Honor, please welcome back to the stage John Sexton.
I love listening to Justice Breyer. It brings us back to the halcyon days of the court. Again, that's for a seminar someplace else. I have a great honor of making a presentation here. Give you a bit of context, 25 years ago this year, NYU committed to becoming, and we called it this, the first truly ecumenical secular university, one that would foster an integrated human community where the dignity and the wisdom of every person is celebrated. To this end, by 2006, we had campuses that supported a semester away, but real campuses on 6 continents. But there was a void. There was no presence in the Arab or Muslim world. Then we discovered the UAE. Abu Dhabi, its great leader, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, and a talented group of people that supported a vision which was the same fully ecumenical vision of a world. Today, NYU Abu Dhabi is, by virtually any measure, the most selective university in the world, fully supported by the government of Abu Dhabi. Its student body is by far the most diverse in the world. It's drawn from every social sector of every country on earth. And the results confirm the success. Just one example, in the first decade, they've been, out of a total group of about 2,000 graduates, 24 Rhodes Scholars. But there's much more. The UAE is the only country in the world with a minister of tolerance. And it's worth noting that the Arabic word for tolerance connotes welcoming and embrace, not just the American concept of I'll put up with you. In 2019, the UAE, in fact, celebrated a year of tolerance. And it's a year that was highlighted by the first visit in history by a pope to the Gulf when Pope Francis came. I remember being at the Mass with 200,000 other people that the Pope celebrated on that visit. Even as the year of tolerance was being observed, construction had begun on one of the most powerful statements of interfaith values in the world. The Abrahamic Family House, as it's called, occupies a space about the size of Washington Square Park, and on it stand, all of equal height, a church, a synagogue, and a mosque. There are actually times of the year when a visitor standing on the plinth can hear simultaneously the bells of Eucharistic consecration, the sound of the shofar, and the Muslim call to prayer, and a kind of unique symphony to what we celebrate today. For me, there's a more personal example, a moment that gives, I think, the essence of the UAE and its deep commitment to a harmonized world. The Jewish community of the Emirates spent a year writing a Torah scroll dedicated to the founder of the UAE, which it then presented to Sheikh Mohammed. It's the first time in history that a local Jewish community had presented a Torah scroll to a Muslim head of state. I cried as I witnessed His Highness complete the last words of the Torah, making them theologically complete by writing the 4 Hebrew words as the scribe guided his hand. This is the spirit we honor today. And I get the privilege of honoring it by presenting it to a very, very special representative of the UAE, a man who himself incarnates this spirit, Yusuf Al-Otaiba, the UAE's ambassador to the United States. I've known Yusuf for over 20 years. I attended his wedding to the magnificent Abir 15 years ago. I know his 2 children. And even as I've seen him grow as a loving husband and dad, I've delighted in seeing him become widely recognized as one of the leading diplomats in the world. It's an understatement to refer to this man as my dear friend, and I'm delighted on your behalf to present him with this award.
I'm recognizing that I'm following both a Supreme Court Justice and John Sexton here, so I hope your expectations are low. John, thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words, thank you for your introduction, but more importantly, thank you for your friendship. And thank you for this journey we've both been on for the last 20 years. Your commitment to dialogue and understanding has inspired so many of us, and it's reflected in the success of NYU Abu Dhabi, something that has exceeded everyone's expectations and would not have happened if it wasn't for John. Yes. I am deeply grateful to accept the Medal of Honor on behalf of the people and the leadership of the UAE. This recognition is for an entire nation that proudly claims tolerance and coexistence as core values. These values are woven into the very fabric of our culture and our identity. It's in our DNA. And we owe much of this spirit to our nation's founder, Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, whose vision continues to guide us today. And while we're proud of our rich history, we are equally committed to building a future where everyone is accepted. Our country is a vibrant mosaic. It's home to hundreds of mosques, more than 40 Christian churches, and 700 ministries, plus Hindu, Sikh, and Buddhist temples, and a growing Jewish community. Perhaps nowhere is this diversity more visible than the Abrahamic Family House in Abu Dhabi, where a church, a synagogue, and a mosque stand side by side. And this is not just a symbol, but it's a living testament to our dedication of religious inclusion. It's a reflection of who we are. Our commitment is clear in the initiatives that we have undertaken, from welcoming Pope Francis for a historic visit and hosting the Special Olympics World Games a few years back. And these are not symbolic gestures. They were opportunities to foster dialogue, mutual respect, and true partnership among people of all backgrounds. In a region too often marked by conflict, our work to promote coexistence and understanding is now more important than it's ever been. On behalf of the people of the United Arab Emirates, I want to thank the Forum on Faith for this recognition and for supporting our shared mission of tolerance, inclusion, and peace. And before I leave the stage, I would be remiss not to mention the uplifting news that we all saw and heard last night. As I look in the room, I see an incredible array of diversity of faith and religion. And I ask you all tonight to pray. Pray that we've ended this chapter of war and violence and hatred, and that today begins a new chapter of peace, stability, and tolerance. Thank you.
On behalf of the steering committee and the board of advisors of the Forum on Faith, I want to thank you all so very much for being with us today for what I dare call the first annual Forum on Faith. It is my joy to announce and to invite you all to join us in 2026 at NYU, where we hope to come together once more to celebrate the faith that makes this city and this nation great. Thank you.
As we conclude this session, please welcome Reverend A.R. Bernard.
Elder Marriott said, "You're the closer." Jesus said, "The last shall be first." So I better get this right, because the last thing you hear will be the first thing you remember about this event. Let me start by giving two thanks. First to Elder Quentin Cook from the LDS. I cannot tell you the amazing hospitality extended to me when we visited Utah. And to see the operations, to experience BYU, it was just a phenomenal event. Thank you for your hospitality and your representation of LDS. Second, I want to thank Elder Marriott for the use of his hotel for this amazing event. I had no idea, but thank you, Elder Marriott. I just got you into trouble, you know that. In 2020, Jonathan Sacks, a rabbi, gave what I think to be a significant contribution to the conversation around morality. His core thesis was society is built on a delicate balance between the I and the we. And when the I dominates our culture, individualism, self-interest, self-expression erodes the moral foundation necessary for building community. We are here today because we understand the power of we, the importance of we. There are three historical systems within every society throughout history: the economic system, the creation and distribution of wealth, the political system, the legitimization and distribution of power. But then there's the moral system, that which is the conscience of the soul of the society, the moral system. That system that's responsible for building and forming internal sense of responsibility, personal control. You can send the National Guard into our urban centers. You can send troops to occupy the streets of our cities. But if you don't strengthen the moral system, the family, our educational system, and our houses of worship, you're only applying a Band-Aid. Because when there is strong internal control, there is less of a need for external controls of policing. That's why houses of worship play such an important role in what happens in our society. Strengthening the family plays such an important role in our society. So hats off to all of you who are here today who understood the importance of gathering like this. Plurality is not a threat to the identity of our nation. It is the strength of the identity of our nation. You cannot sit at the table with someone of another belief, of another faith, if you're not secure in your own faith. Because we're secure in our faith, and we didn't come here today with the fear of being converted, even though Rabbi Potasnik has been trying for 10 years. And we're still friends. We're here because we understand the power of we. So thank you for being here. Thank you for understanding the important role that we play in what happens in the future of our nation. God bless.
Our benediction by Guruji, His Holiness Dalip Kumar Venkapad.
My beloved religious, spiritual, community leaders, and global family members, including indigenous people. It is a distinct honor and privilege to offer a benediction at this esteemed Forum on Faith. I extend my gratitude to the Church and all the organizers for permitting me to chant ancient Vedic prayers. I will begin with the prayers in Sanskrit, followed by the English translation. Om Bhurvuvasva Tatsavidurvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yana Prachodayat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarugumya Bandhana Mrityur Mukshayamamrita Om Sarvesham Swastir Bhavadu Sarvesham Shantir Bhavadu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavadu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavadu Sarve Bhavantu Suvinagam Sarve Santu Niramayam Sarve Bhadrani Pachandu Magaccha Dukapad Bhave Asudoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mridam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya पुनमेवावशिष्यते लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु लोका समस्ता सुखिनो भवन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः Om, pervading the earth, consciousness of the physical plane, the intermediate space, consciousness of vital force and sky, heaven, consciousness of the divine mind, that divine essence of the sun, which is the most adorable. I meditate on that divine effulgence. May that awaken our spiritual consciousness. Om, we sacrifice to Triambaka, the fragrant increaser of prosperity. Like a cucumber from its stem, might I be freed from death, not from deathlessness. Om, may there be well-being in all, may there be peace in all, may there be fulfillment in all, may there be auspiciousness in all. Om, may all be happy, may all be free from illness, may all see what is auspicious, may no one suffer. Om, lead me from the untruth to the truth. Lead me from darkness to light. Lead me from death to immortality. Om, that is infinite. And this is infinite. This infinite proceeds from the infinite, taking the infinitude of the infinitude. It remains as the infinite alone. Om, may everyone in the whole world be happy. In conclusion, O God of all, grant our New York State Governor and all public servants the forum of faith, wisdom, compassion, love, harmony, and determination to legislate while representing the best interest of all New Yorkers, regardless of their religion, ethnicity, culture, or traditions. We all are equal and deserve the respect that is rightfully ours. Begin the day with love, spend the day with love, fill the day with love, and end the day with love. That's the way to connect with the divine nature of the universe. Love all, serve all. May the divinity bless all of us forever. In the name of God, may we say Amen.
That concludes this portion of the program. Thank you for being with us. We'll now begin our afternoon breakout sessions in about 5 minutes. The film Baseball Beyond Belief begins here. The Family Search breakout session is in the far corner over there. The Inspiring a Culture of Service breakout is over here. And then lastly, the Pierce versus Society of Sisters breakout is on this side. Baseball film here in 5 minutes. Thank you.